Sometimes it's the little things that remind us of them. Stay close, even when you're far apart. Send money worldwide with Remitly.
A traditional funeral isn't for everyone. That's why we also offer simple, direct cremations. However you choose to say goodbye, we help you own it.
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the World Report. I'm Arjun, Samar, Mahendran, and here's what's making headlines around the world. The US government shutdown has officially taken effect, viewers, the first since 2019 to be precise, and under US President Donald Trump's second term. Now, this comes after US senators have failed to pass a last-minute bill to in fact avert a government shutdown, all but guaranteeing funding will be cut off at midnight. Now, a shutdown brings some but not all US government services to a temporary halt. Services deemed non-essential, which include food assistance programs, federally funded preschools, the issuing of student loans, food inspections, and even operations at national parks, will be shut. Meanwhile, we get you this war of words between Democrats and President Donald Trump, followed by a report by my colleague Kate Fisher from Washington, D.C.
Republicans are plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all.
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats.
Trump doesn't care about how this shutdown is going to hurt real, average Americans across the country. He doesn't care about the Republican healthcare crisis. He clearly thinks this is all a game.
As you know, this country, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration health care for everybody that comes into the country. That's what they're insisting. And obviously, I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody.
Shutting down the government means hundreds of thousands of government workers are set to be furloughed, that is, sent home without pay, only to be back paid once the government reopens. But US President Trump has threatened to make permanent cuts to the federal workforce, saying of the Democrats that his administration could do irreversible things during a shutdown, quote, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. Now, two unions have already sued the Trump administration over its plans to fire federal workers. And Democrats have brushed off the ultimatum, accusing Republicans of lying about what they are seeking from this legislation. Democrats say they want the bill to include provisions to roll back healthcare cuts that Republicans made over the summer, as well as to extend Obamacare subsidies. But Republicans say those issues can be dealt with after the government has been funded again. Some of the most visible effects of a shutdown will be closures at museums and monuments, and federal workers will see their paychecks stop for the duration of a shutdown, even if they have to stay on the job. And that's workers like active duty troops, air traffic controllers and federal law enforcement officers. The Postal Service, which is self-funded, and Social Security and Medicare benefits, which are considered mandatory spending, should keep on going. Now, who the public sees as being at fault for causing a shutdown could bring pressure to bear on these lawmakers. A recent poll suggests that Republicans would get a larger share of blame for a government shutdown than their Democratic counterparts. That's according to an NPR PBS News Marist research that was released on Tuesday. Kate Fisher, NDTV, Washington.
Shift our focus to Central Asia in Afghanistan, where the country has been plunged into near total digital darkness. Now, this comes as the Taliban regime has enforced a sweeping internet blackout, essentially cutting off both wired and also mobile services across the country. Now, what began as regional restrictions last month has now escalated into a full-blown nationwide showdown, if we can say so, leaving millions without access to essential online services. Now, the Taliban claim that the move is aimed at curbing vice and preventing what they described as immoral activities. However, viewers, the blackout is severely disrupting daily life, crippling businesses and cutting off vital communication channels. Foreign workers in the United Kingdom will need to wait 10 years instead of the present 5 to qualify for permanent residency, and migrants will need to pass a series of new tests to prove their ability to be a good citizen. The Labour government has announced. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has said that people will have to earn the right to claim indefinite leave to remain in the country, which would then allow in turn them the ability to work in the UK and route to a citizenship. Shift our focus to Southeast Asia, where a strong 6.9 magnitude offshore earthquake rocked Philippines, killing at least 69 people with over 140 still injured. As officials warned, the numbers could very well climb further as rescuers access collapsed buildings. The Indian Embassy in Manila, meanwhile, has expressed its deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of those affected by this natural calamity in the country. Here are some of the most defining visuals from the earthquake. First up, CCTV footage from Cebu City shows residents panicking as they began to feel the ground shake, as they began to feel the tremors. Some would say sending people dashing out into streets. Moreover, residents also panicked in dark as the intense shaking cut off power supply, with videos also showing structures collapsing altogether and crowds running in fear at a public market. Up next, and a not-so-picturesque ending to the Miss Asia Pacific International 2025. As viral visuals, as you see there on your screens right now, viewers, show chaos and utter chaos at that during the closing gala night of the event. This as panic-gripped models fell off the runway, which began shaking as the 6.9 magnitude quake hit the Philippines. Now, this sent everyone to seek shelter under tables to protect themselves from falling debris in last-ditch effort. Now, one of the contestants, Miss Belgium, also suffered an injury after falling off the runway. And among the many buildings which collapsed includes a centuries-old church as well. That's correct. The Archidocian shrine of Santa Rosa de Lima in Cebu suffered extensive damage. Visual shows piles of debris outside the sanctuary, with large sections of the historic building visibly torn apart. Rubble was also scattered inside the monastery, where properties were destroyed. Built in 1886 for perspective, the shrine was considered the Philippines' first Archidocian church dedicated to Saint Rose of Lima. Meanwhile, my colleague Disha Bagchi joins us for more on this. Disha, at least around 300 people confirmed dead already, hundreds more in need of severe rescue by the teams. What's the latest that you're picking up on ground?
Right. So right now, of course, rescue operations are going on. Officials have said that while so far they have declared 69 people killed in this devastating earthquake, they do expect that this figure is going to increase drastically. Now, because there were multiple buildings, as well as the 100-year-old church that you mentioned, several buildings, in fact, collapsed. There was quite a lot of damage. The drone visuals we've also received show that massive damage, a lot of commercial buildings collapsing, but this kind of impact and this kind of devastation is quite new to Philippines, even though it is it does frequently face earthquakes, given the fact that it is in the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is where the two tectonic plates in fact grind. So there's a lot of small earthquakes that do take place in the Philippines. In fact, just earlier this year in January, the Philippines faced two less stronger earthquakes, and there was not a lot of devastation and no casualties. But this one was quite a strong 6.9 magnitude earthquake, which is why the Philippines has seen such large-scale devastation. As you mentioned, so far 69 people killed, 140 injured, but this number is of course going to increase in the days to come as officials continue rescue operations.
And you in fact raised a very important point there, Disha, that the Philippines lies in the ring of fire where two tectonic plates meet. And this earthquake, meanwhile, for our viewers' perspective, comes just a day after a hurricane lashed the Philippines, the island country, leaving at least 20 dead. Thank you so much for getting us the latest once again, Disha. Moving on, we shift our focus to Ottawa, where Canada's Foreign Minister Anita Anand is set to visit India on the 13th and the 14th of October, marking a key step in restoring diplomatic ties between New Delhi and Ottawa. Now, the visit comes as an evident sign, viewers, that both nations are in fact ready to re-engage. Now, ahead of a visit by Canadian Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with her in New York only earlier this week. Over in the Middle East, days after US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to a new US proposal, 20-point proposal, Qatar is now holding mediation talks with Hamas leaders along with Egypt and Turkey over the US peace plan, or the 20-point Trump peace plan as it's being called. Meanwhile, the Arab country confirmed that Hamas officials have officially received the full US peace plan and are currently examining it. The plan includes, if Hamas agrees, an immediate ceasefire and the release of all Israeli detainees within 72 hours of the terrorist group, in fact, agreeing to the terms if they choose to do so, if they decide to do so at that. Meanwhile, the death toll in Gaza has reached over 66,000 Palestinians, with nearly 170,000 others wounded. Now, this comes as Israel's military operations in Gaza rage on. Meanwhile, listen in to the Qatar Foreign Minister.
بالنسبة للوفود الموجودة في الدوحة، شارك رئيس المخابرات المصرية يوم أمس في الاجتماع، وكذلك اليوم من الجانب التركي سيشارك في هذه الاجتماعات مع الوفد التفاوضي لحركة حماس. الاجتماع الذي عقد في نيويورك بين عدد من قادة الدول العربية والإسلامية مع الرئيس الأمريكي وسع دائرة المشاركة.
Stay with the Middle East, where after Syrian government fighters entered the city of Sweda earlier this year in an apparent bid to assert control over the enclave of the Druze minority, leading to Israeli strikes on capital Damascus. Now the Druze groups have in fact set up a de facto military and a governmental body in Sweda, very similar to the Kurdish-led authorities in the country's northeast. Now it is a major setback for Damascus, struggling to exert its authority across the country. And of course, this follows a 13-year-long civil war with the support of minorities. This next report explains the details.
When Bashar al-Assad was ousted in an insurgency last year led by Islamist groups, Syria's Druze minority community poured into the streets to celebrate. They had hoped that Syria would become a democracy and that they would establish strong ties with the new rulers in Damascus. But 8 months later, they're back on the streets in the southern province of Sweda calling for self-determination. All their hopes had faded in July when clashes spiraled into targeted sectarian attacks. Rights groups like Amnesty International say that government forces and their allies committed all sorts of atrocities against the Druze minority. And now it appears they're creating an autonomous administration similar to that of the Kurds in northeastern Syria, with their own government and military bodies. And another apparent shift among the Druze, many appear to be leaning towards Israel, whose military struck government forces during the clashes and has a sizable Druze community there. Now, Syria's Druze spiritual leader, Sheikh Ahmed al-Hajari, was among a few voices that were skeptical of negotiations with Damascus, but now he's the most dominant leader there. He set up the Supreme Legal Council, a government-like entity, and managed to band dozens of militias together to form what is called the National Guard, a military-like entity in the southern province.
We now focus on Eurasia, viewers, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that the situation at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station had become critical with Russian shelling preventing restoration of power needed to cool the reactors and prevent an all-out meltdown. Now, while the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog, is working with both sides to restore external power lines, this is the 10th such incident since the start of the Ukraine war back in February 22, when the plant has been disconnected from the power grid. Now, this, of course, increased risks of a nuclear meltdown. Listen in to what the Ukrainian president had to say.
Вже 7-й день, і раніше, до речі, не було такого аварійна ситуація на Запорізькій атомній станції. Ситуація критична. Через російські обстріли станція відключена від живлення, від електромережі. Забезпечується електрикою від дизель-генераторів.
Over to the land down under, where Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called on China to import Australian iron ore without hindrance. Now, this comes after reports on Wednesday that a state-run Chinese iron ore buyer had told steelmakers and traders to temporarily stop buying shipments from global mining giant BHP. The China Mineral Resources Group company's move against the world's biggest miner based in Melbourne escalates an impasse that contracts negotiations. Albanese has said he was quote-unquote concerned by reports of disruption of Australia's most lucrative export. Here's more.
What we want to make sure is that markets operate properly. And of course, we have seen those issues in the past. I want to see Australian iron ore be able to be exported into China without hindrance. That is important. It makes a major contribution to China's economy, but also to Australia's.
Would that be disappointing considering your recent trip to China?
Well, these measures are always disappointing, but let's hope certainly that they are very much short-term.
Dozens of young demonstrators took to the streets of Madagascar's capital calling for President Andry Rajoelina to step down. Meanwhile, President Rajoelina fired the Prime Minister and the rest of his cabinet along with him on Monday in response to days of deadly Gen Z-led protests which began, in fact, over the failure of electricity and water supply. Essential needs at that. The protesters further had called for the resignation of both Christian Natse and President Rajoelina, but the president gave no indication that he would in fact step down. Shift our focus eastwards now, where China celebrated its 76th National Day today with a grand flag-raising ceremony in the Tiananmen Square at a high-level reception at the Great Hall of People in Beijing. Ahead of a countrywide celebration, Chinese President Xi Jinping issued a sharp warning, or a stark warning, over the issue of Taiwan, essentially saying Beijing must firmly oppose, and I quote him here, external interference and safeguard its territorial integrity. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio extended congratulations, reinstating a once-broken tradition to mark the occasion before October 1 arrives in the United States. Meanwhile, the Shenzhou 20 crew sent videos greeting from space. Over in the U.S., a federal judge has ruled that Trump administration violated the Constitution when it targeted non-U.S. citizens for deportation solely on supporting Palestinians and criticizing Israel. That's a scathing ruling, directly and sharply criticizing President Donald Trump and his policies as serious threats to free speech. U.S. District Judge William Young in Boston agreed with several university associations that the policy they described as ideological deportation violates the First Amendment as well as the Administrative Procedures Act. It's a law governing how federal agencies, in fact, develop and issue regulations. Here's more.
Young held in this decision that the secretaries of state and Homeland Security intentionally and in concert engaged in a campaign of intimidation, a campaign that involved arresting, detaining, and deporting individuals like Mahmoud Halil, Rumeysa Ozturk, and Mohsen Madawi in order to chill pro-Palestinian speech and speech that is critical of Israel.
And well, with that, it's time we step into a short break. Much more lined up on the other side. And of course, don't you go anywhere.
The UK's first human heart transplant has been completed, supported by the British Heart Foundation.
We were a noisy generation, but it might be something quiet we do that becomes our greatest legacy. Leave a gift in your will to the British Heart Foundation and fund groundbreaking research that could help save millions of lives. Search BHF Wills.
Don't they grow up so fast? And sometimes the big life moments like a new home and a new school can be scary. Which reminds me, I don't want my family to worry about mortgage costs if the worst should happen. That's why I'm looking into smart family life insurance.
Hi, I'd like a quick quote, please.
OK, you can choose a benefit amount up to £750,000 depending on your age. If you're a UK resident aged 18 to 64, you can apply with just a few health and lifestyle questions. For £250,000 of cover, the price starts at just £14.77 a month.
That's less than I thought. I could help my husband with the mortgage.
Just like families, not all life insurance is the same. That's why we offer the Smart Family Guarantee.
That's good to know.
For even greater peace of mind, you'll also receive a 100% advance in the event of terminal illness and 10% cash back on your first year's premiums. That's the Smart Cashback. Plus, you'll also get your choice of a £125 gift card.
To get a free quote today, call our specialist UK team on 0800 542 1775 or visit smartinsurance.co.uk.
Tina's smart. She uses Wise to send and spend money overseas. Tina's gone. Whether she's sending money overseas or paying with the Wise travel card abroad, she could save up to 70% compared to using major banks. Join Tina and 14 million people worldwide who found a smart way to send and spend money overseas. Be smart. Get Wise.
Since I retired, I've finally got time for the important stuff, like helping my family manage financially if anything happens to me. Which reminds me.
Welcome to British Seniors, the UK's #1 rated provider of over 50s life insurance.
Hi, I'd like a quick quote, please.
We're proud to offer our seniors lifetime guarantee. With 100% of claims having been paid, we guarantee your premiums will never go up and that you'll speak to one of our specialists in the UK. UK residents aged 50 to 80 are guaranteed to be accepted. Depending on your age, your loved ones can get a cash payout up to £10,000.
And that money could help with my funeral costs or as a gift for my granddaughter. I'll do it.
Plus, when you sign up, you'll receive a £135 gift card and free 24/7 GP advice and health services.
Be proud to protect your loved ones with British Seniors. To get a free quote today, call our UK team on 0800 977 6843 or visit britishseniors.co.uk.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching the Wednesday edition of the World Report. I'm Arjun, Samar and Mahendran, and we take you to the world of business, where Apple says it did nothing wrong in choosing to partner with OpenAI rather than Elon Musk's XAI when it added generative artificial intelligence to its iPhone operating systems. Now, this move comes after Musk's AI startup and X sued Apple and OpenAI back in August, seeking billions of dollars in damages over their claim that the iPhone maker's favoritism towards OpenAI, run by Musk's rival Sam Altman, hindered innovation in the AI industry and also deprived customers of choices. The World of Sports team India began their ICC Women's World Cup 2025 journey with a strong performance, defeating Sri Lanka by 59 runs under the DLS method, or the Duckworth-Lewis method, in a range-shortened opening match on Tuesday. Now, the game was reduced to 47 overs per side due to intermittent showers, adding much pressure to both the teams. India bowled Sri Lanka out for 211 to win by 59 runs at the Barsapara Cricket Stadium on Tuesday. Amanjot Kaur and Deepti Sharma chipped in with half-centuries to save the blushes for the Indian side after some early struggles. Team India has raised strong objections at the Asian Cricket Council meeting on Tuesday and also grilled the ACC chief and Pakistan cricket chairman Mohsin Naqvi for his part in the Asia Cup Trophy fiasco during the post-match presentation after the final. The visuals are on your screen, viewers. Now, India refused to accept the trophy from Naqvi, and he in turn responded by taking it to his custody. Now, the BCCI Vice President Rajiv Shukla, who also attended the meeting representing BCCI, asked tough questions to Naqvi and grilled him for not handling the trophy to the victorious Indian team. Shukla also reminded that the trophy is the property of the ACC and not Naqvi himself, who had in fact taken it along with him to his hotel room. The BCCI Vice President further added that the trophy needs to be handed to India in a proper manner and that the ACC better look into the matter immediately. My colleague Rika gets you more.
There was an ACC or the Asian Cricket Council meeting this afternoon. It was attended by Rajiv Shukla, the Vice President of BCCI, and Ashish Shelar, the former Treasurer of BCCI, both of whom are members on the board of ACC. They lodged a very strong protest because the cup still lies in Mr. Naqvi's custody. They asked for it to be kept at least in the ACC office and not with Mr. Naqvi. And they said if he doesn't keep it in the ACC office, then matters would be escalated to ICC. On the other hand, Mr. Naqvi, who's now playing the battle beyond 22 yards, said that he felt like a cartoon, quote unquote, and felt embarrassed standing there for 45 minutes when there was no communication. The Indian camp is doubling down on him, saying that he cannot take the trophy away. Even though Indian team didn't collect it, it should have been kept in the ACC headquarters and not in Mr. Naqvi's hotel. So there is a lot of back and forth going on. Midway through the meeting, Ashish Shelar, who joined online, both the members of BCCI joined online. Ashish Shelar logged out because he was very angry at a protesting Mr. Naqvi, who says that he was belittled by India. And India also says that the Indian team felt humiliated by his gestures, and it was made very clear to ACC long before the trophy ceremony, at least on 15th of September, that if Indian team went on to win the cup, they wouldn't collect it from Mohsin Naqvi. So it was the failure on the part of ACC not to have made another arrangement.
And viewers, sustainability has taken over the Paris Fashion Week as Helen Mirren kicked off Stella McCartney's show focused on humanity, animals and of course Mother Earth. With a spoken rendition of the Beatles' Come Together, McCartney claims this is her most sustainable connection yet, with as much as 98% sustainable and 100% cruelty-free materials. Innovations include favors a plant-based feather alternative and Pure Tech, well, it's a fabric that absorbs air pollutants. The show also featured deconstructed tailoring, vibrant colors and upcycled elements. And well, it's a wrap on this Wednesday edition of the World Report. Take care and have a wonderful day.
No child should suffer the torture of trachoma, but so many are in pain right now. Nananga's lashes have turned inwards. They rip and tear away at his eyes. Pamelo's sight could be gone forever. He's just 3 years old. Kofanga screams for his mother. His eyes are so infected that he can't even see her. For so many children in the world's poorest countries, trachoma is torture. It's a painful infection often spread by flies, and it's destroying children's eyesight. But it could be stopped if you help today. By calling 0800 021 3925 and giving £2 a month to Sightsavers, you can help make sure children get the treatment they desperately need. You'll help us bring them the medicines and the care that can treat infections. And that means you'll be helping to save children from the torture of trachoma and a life of blindness. Please help us reach them. Call 0800 021 3925, text C7 to 82727, or go online and give just £2 a month now. Because we need you to help save the sight of children like Nananga. We need you to help save them from the torture of trachoma.
Sometimes it's the little things that remind us of them. Stay close, even when you're far apart. Send money worldwide with Remitly.
So I've just got Sun Life's guaranteed over 50 plan. Super easy, no medical questions. I finally have the confidence to devote myself to my craft.
Woodwork?
I even made this.
Really?
With Sun Life, there's a guaranteed cash payout. But this is one less thing you'll have to spend it on.
Search Sun Life Plan today and get your first 6 months premiums back.
We have a range of funeral plans with up to £250 off. However you choose to say goodbye, we help you own it.
Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I'm Arjun, Samar, Mahendran, and here are the headlines this Wednesday. US government shutdown begins after Senate fails to pass funding bill amid partisan deadlock. Getting UK permanent residency becomes more tedious. Permanent residency wait for foreign workers doubled to 10 years. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand meets External Affairs Minister Jaishankar in New York, set to visit New Delhi on October 13th and 14th. Awami League holds protests in Geneva against Yunus government in Bangladesh, accuses interim leader of fueling extremism. And BCCI calls Mohsin Naqvi's bluff. Viewers, first trophy chori, now conditions. BCCI makes it clear it's our trophy and we'll take it on our terms. The top story on India Global this Wednesday, viewers. The US has officially entered another federal shutdown just a few hours ago. While it may sound like a political drama in Washington, but for millions of Americans together, and let me tell you that it hits much closer to home. In fact, it's much more than headlines for millions of Americans. Now, here's what really changes when the federal government shuts down. Even with a shutdown, airports stay open, but at a cost. TSA agents and air traffic controllers are considered essential, so they keep working without pay. Now, that can lead to staffing shortages and even delays, especially if workers start calling out sick. Now, next up, those planning international travel should expect delays. Passport offices remain open, but reduced staffing can very well slow down processing times. With fewer hands on deck, routine renewals could take weeks longer. Some parks shut their gates, while others might stay open, but they will be understaffed. Now, that means no rangers, no services, and ever-growing concerns over safety, trash, and even vandalism at these iconic national sites. But that's not all. Federal employees, including active duty military personnel, will not get paid until the shutdown effectively ends or winds up. so to say. Now, their work continues, but the paychecks will stop. It's financial stress for not only families serving the countries, but also essential workers. Speaking of essentials, food programs like SNAP and WIC could be in huge trouble if the shutdown, in fact, drags on. While benefits might be able to continue short term, funding could dry up really fast, especially for WIC or WIC, which supports mothers and infants. Now, one thing that would not change are America's mails. That corrects. The Postal Service runs independently and will not be affected by the shutdown. Meanwhile, deliveries, stamps, and even postal office will all stay open. Shifting gears, in fact, and speaking of weather arts, well, they have to stay. However, all upgrades will be paused during entire duration of the federal shutdown. Meanwhile, FEMA will be working, but funds will run dry. But if the shutdown drags on, it is possible that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, as I just told you, could very well run out of money for its disaster relief fund. So while the Congress fights over funding, real Americans, millions of them at that, viewers, are feeling the heat.
Plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all.
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats.
Trump doesn't care about how this shutdown is going to hurt real, average Americans across the country. He doesn't care about the Republican healthcare crisis. He clearly thinks this is all a game.
As you know, this country, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration health care for everybody that comes into the country. That's what they're insisting. And obviously, I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody.
Meanwhile, Professor Swaran Singh joins us for more on this. He's the Professor of International Relations at JNU. Thank you so much for taking up the time and joining us on this very important bulletin, sir. Professor, now I'd like to start by asking you the bottom line here. Who really feels the shutdown first, and who feels it the hardest?
Obviously, there is a whole spectrum of people who will get impacted. Immediately, of course, there could be a large number of federal employees, but also by extension, all those who depend on federal loans or federal contracts, particularly small businesses which depend on regular cash flows. But in long run, also the whole the system of United States in terms of its global credibility, United States being largest economy on the planet means such disruptions will also impact global stock exchanges. Commodity prices could go up because US is the most important importer of heavy value, high value commodities. It could also mean impact on American prestige and credibility among friends and so on. And what makes it particularly intriguing is that this time, though there have been several shutdowns or one-day gaps between funding, this time we have been hearing President Trump from the very beginning trying to cut down the size of bureaucracy. And he's very clearly adamant on not really changing or reversing tax cuts or coming back to healthcare subsidies. So
I'd like to come in there, Professor Singh. You very interestingly, sir, mentioned credibility. I have a question around this. Is this crisis all about budget, or is it also about politics? And how long can essential workers go on without being paid?
I was exactly coming to that this is not a simple contestation on a budget in terms of numbers. It's a clear policy divide that is making it more difficult to bridge the gap between two sides. Obviously, Democrats are very upset with the fact that Republicans chose to pass it clean in the House, as they are saying, because they could muster the majority there. But in Senate, they need sort of supra majority of 60 out of 100 numbers, and they have only 53, so they depend on Democrats here. And that is where Democrats are now insisting that for each vote they need concessions. And what we are reading in media is that they're asking for concession of healthcare subsidies up to $1 trillion, which may not be easily acceptable to Republicans. So I am assuming that the shutdown is not going to end very soon. It could go up to a week, even worst case fortnight. And that would mean 1% sort of reduction of US GDP in terms of productivity coming down. And that is what makes it really much more serious and complex with global implications. It will impact their visas, embassy operations, international negotiations. We are doing India-United States trade negotiations. It could even go as far as that. So it's a policy divide, and I think the whole very strange and adamant attitude of President Trump very clearly makes it difficult. And it serves his purpose in also cutting down the fat and the bureaucracy, as he keeps saying repeatedly. So not just the temporary jobs, non-essential jobs, even permanent and essential